Don't forget to subscribe. Afterwards, the wisest and most spiritual books from the greatest authors await you every day. And now buckle up, sit back and we'll begin. Max Heindel. The Rosicrucian Mysteries. The Order of Rosicrucians and the Rosicrucian Fellowship. Our message and mission: a sane mind, a soft heart, a sound body. Before entering upon an explanation of the teachings of the Rosicrucians, it may be well to say a word about them and about the place they hold in the evolution of humanity. For reasons to be given later, these teachings advocate the dualistic view. They hold that man is a spirit enfolding all the powers of God, as the seed enfolds the plant, and that these powers are being slowly unfolded by a series of existences in a gradually improving earthy body. Also, that this process of development has been performed under the guidance of exalted beings who are yet ordering our steps, though in a decreasing measure. As we gradually acquire intellect and will, these exalted beings, though unseen to the physical eyes, are nevertheless potent factors in all affairs of life, and give to the various groups of humanity lessons which will most efficiently promote the growth of their spiritual powers. In fact, the earth may be likened to a vast training school in which there are pupils of varying age and ability, as we find it in one of our own schools. There are the savages, living and worshipping under most primitive conditions, seeing in stick or stone a god. Then, as man progresses onwards and upwards in the scale of civilization, we find a higher and higher conception of deity, which has flowered here in our Western world in the beautiful Christian religion that now furnishes our spiritual inspiration and incentive to improve. These various religions have been given to each group of humanity by the exalted beings whom we know in the Christian religion as the recording angels, whose wonderful prevision enabled them to view the trend of even so unstable a quantity as the human mind, and thus they are enabled to determine what steps are necessary to lead our unfoldment along the lines congruous to the highest universal good. When we study the history of the ancient nations, we shall find that at about 600 years BC, a great spiritual wave had its inception on the eastern shores of the Pacific Ocean, where the great Confucian religion accelerated the progress of the Chinese nation. Then also the religion of the Buddha commenced to win its millions of adherents in India. And still further west we have the lofty philosophy of Pythagoras. Each system was suited to the needs of the particular people to whom it was sent. Then came the period of the skeptics in Greece, and later, traveling westward, the same spiritual wave is manifested as the Christian religion of the so-called Dark Ages, when the dogma of a dominant church compelled belief from the whole of Western Europe. It is a law in the universe that a wave of spiritual awakening is always followed by a period of doubting materialism. Each phase is necessary in order that the spirit may receive equal development of heart and intellect, without being carried too far in either direction. The great beings aforementioned, who care for our progress, always take steps to safeguard humanity against that danger, and when they foresaw the wave of materialism which commenced in the 16th century with the birth of our modern science, they took steps to protect the West, as they had formerly safeguarded the East against the skeptics, who were held in check by the mystery schools. In the 13th century there appeared in Central Europe a great spiritual teacher whose symbolical name was Christian Rosicrucian. The Rosicrucian Mysteries, or Christian Rose Cross, who founded the mysterious order of the Rosy Cross, concerning which so many speculations have been made, and so little has become known to the world at large, for it is the mystery school of the West, and is only open to those who have attained the stage of spiritual unfoldment, necessary to be initiated in its secrets concerning the science of life and being. If we are so far developed that we are able to leave our dense physical body and take a soul flight into interplanetary space, we shall find that the ultimate physical atom is spherical in shape like our Earth. It is a ball. When we take a number of balls of even size and group them around one, it will take just 12 balls to hide a 13th within. Thus the 12 visible and the 1 hidden are numbers revealing a cosmic relationship, and as all mystery orders are based upon cosmic lines, they are composed of 12 members gathered around a 13th who is the invisible head. There are 7 colors in the spectrum: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo and violet. But between the violet and the red, there are still other 5 colors which are invisible to the physical eye, but reveal themselves to the spiritual sight. In every mystery order there are also 7 brothers who at times go out into the world and there perform whatever work may be necessary to advance the people among whom they serve, but 5 are never seen outside the temple. They work with and teach those alone who have passed through certain stages of spiritual unfoldment and are able to visit the temple in their spiritual bodies, a feat taught in the first initiation, which usually takes place outside the temple, as it is not convenient for all to visit that place physically. Let not the reader imagine that this initiation makes the pupil a Rosicrucian. It does not, any more than admission to a high school makes a boy a member of the faculty. Nor does he become a Rosicrucian even after having passed through all the 9 degrees of this or any other mystery school. The Rosicrucians are hierophants of the lesser mysteries, and beyond them there are still schools wherein greater mysteries are taught. Those who have advanced through the lesser mysteries and have become pupils of the greater mysteries are called adepts, but even they have not reached the exalted standpoint of the 12 brothers of the Rosicrucian order, or the hierophants of any other lesser mystery school, any more than the freshman at college has attained to the knowledge and position of a teacher in the high school from which he has just graduated. A later work will deal with initiation, but we may say here that the door of a genuine mystery school is not unlocked by a golden key, but is only opened as a reward for meritorious service to humanity, and anyone who advertises himself as a Rosicrucian or makes a charge for tuition by either of those acts shows himself to be a charlatan. The true pupil of any mystery school is far too modest to advertise the fact. He will scorn all titles or honors from men. He will have no regard for riches, save the riches of love given to him by those whom it becomes his privilege to help and teach. In the centuries that have gone by since the Rosicrucian order was first formed, they have worked quietly and secretly, aiming to mold the thought of Western Europe through the works of Paracelsus, Boehme, Bacon, Shakespeare, Flood and others. Each night at midnight, when the physical activities of the day are at their lowest ebb and the spiritual impulse at its highest flood tide, they have sent out from their temple soul, stirring vibrations to counteract materialism and to further the development of soul powers. To their activities we owe the gradual spiritualization of our once so materialistic science. With the commencement of the 20th century, a further step was taken. It was realized that something must be done to make religion scientific, as well as to make science religious, in order that they may ultimately blend. For at the present time the Rosicrucian mysteries and intellect are divorced. The heart instinctively feels the truth of religious teachings concerning such wonderful mysteries as the Immaculate Conception, the mystic birth, the crucifixion, the mystic death, the cleansing blood, the atonement, and other doctrines of the Church, which the intellect refuses to believe, as they are incapable of demonstration and seemingly at war with natural law. Material advancement may be furthered when intellect is dominant and the longings of the heart unsatisfied, but soul growth will be retarded until the heart also receives satisfaction. In order to give the world a teaching so blended that it will satisfy both the mind and heart, a messenger must be found and instructed. Certain unusual qualifications were necessary, and the first one chosen failed to pass a certain test after several years had been spent to prepare him for the work to be done. It is well said that there is a time to sow and a time to reap, and that there are certain times for all the works of life, and in accordance with this law of periodicity, each impulse in spiritual uplift must also be undertaken at an appropriate time to be successful. The first and sixth decades of each century are particularly propitious to commence the promulgation of new spiritual teachings. Therefore, the Rosicrucians were much concerned at this failure, for only 5 years were left of the first decade of the 20th century. Their second choice of a messenger fell upon the present writer, though he knew it not at the time, and by shaping circumstances about him, they made it possible for him to begin a period of preparation for the work they desired him to do. 3 years later, when he had gone to Germany, also because of circumstances shaped by the invisible brotherhood, and was on the verge of despair at the discovery that the light which was the object of his quest was only a jack-o'-lantern, the brothers of the Rosicrucian order applied the test to see whether he would be a faithful messenger and give the teachings they desired to entrust to him, to the world. And when he had passed the trial, they gave him the monumental solution of the problem of existence, first published in the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception in November 1909, more than a year before the expiration of the first decade of the 20th century. This book marked a new era in so-called occult literature, and the many editions which have since been published, as well as the thousands of letters which continue to come to the author, are speaking testimonies to the fact that people are finding in this teaching a satisfaction they have long sought elsewhere in vain. The Rosicrucians teach that all great religions have been given to the people among whom they are found by divine intelligences, who designed each system of worship to suit the needs of the race or nation to whom it was given. A primitive people cannot respond to a lofty and sublime religion, and vice versa. What helps one race would hinder another, and in pursuance of the same policy there has been devised a system of soul unfoldment, suited specially to the Western people, who are racially and temperamentally unfit to undergo the discipline of the Eastern school, which was designed for the more backward Hindus. The Rosicrucian Fellowship, for the purpose of promulgating the Rosicrucian teachings in the Western world, the Rosicrucian Fellowship was founded in 1909. It is the herald of the Aquarian Age, when the sun by its precessional passage through the constellation Aquarius will bring out all the intellectual and spiritual potencies in man, which are symbolized by that sign. As heat from a fire warms all objects within the sphere of its radiations, so also the Aquarian ray will raise the Earth's vibrations to a pitch we are as yet unable to comprehend, though we have demonstrations of the material workings of this force in the inventions which have revolutionized life within the memory of the present generation. We have wondered at the X-ray, which sees through the Rosicrucian Mysteries body, but each one has a sense latent which, when evolved, will enable him to see through any number of bodies or to any distance. We marvel at the telephone conversations across the continent of America, but each has within a latent sense of speech and hearing that is far more acute. We are surprised at the exploits of ships under sea and in the sky, but we are all capable of passage under water or through the sky, nay, more. We may pass unscathed through the solid rock and the raging fire, if we know how. And lightning itself is slow compared to the speed with which we may travel. This sounds like a fairy tale today, as did Jules Verne's stories a generation ago, but the Aquarian age will witness the realization of these dreams, and ever so much more that we still do not even dream of. Such faculties will then be the possessions of large numbers of people who will have gradually evolved them as previously the ability to walk, speak, hear, and see were developed. Therein lies a great danger, for, obviously, anyone endowed with such faculties may use them to the greatest detriment of the world at large, unless restrained by a spirit of unselfishness and an all-embracing altruism. Therefore, religion is needed today as never before to foster love and fellow feeling among humanity, so that it may be prepared to use the great gifts in store for it wisely and well. This need of religion is specially felt in a certain class where the ether is more loosely knit to the physical atoms than in the majority, and on that account, they are now beginning to sense the Aquarian vibrations. This class is again divided in two groups. In one, the intellect is dominant, and the people in that class therefore seek to grasp the spiritual mysteries out of curiosity from the viewpoint of cold reason. They pursue the path of knowledge for the sake of knowledge, considering that an end in itself. The idea that knowledge is of value only when put to practical constructive use does not seem to have presented itself to them. This class we may call occultists. The other group does not care for knowledge, but feels an inner urge Godward, and pursues the path of devotion to the high ideal set before them in Christ, doing the deeds that He did as far their flesh will permit, and this in time results in an interior illumination, which brings with it all the knowledge obtained by the other class, and much more. This class we may describe as mystics. Certain dangers confront each of the two groups. If the occultist obtains illumination and evolves within himself the latent spiritual faculties, he may use them for the furtherance of his personal objects, to the great detriment of his fellow men. That is black magic, and the punishment which it automatically calls down upon the head of the perpetrator is so awful that it is best to draw the veil over it. The mystic may also err because of ignorance and fall into the meshes of nature's law, but being actuated by love, his mistakes will never be very serious, and as he grows in grace, the soundless voice within his heart will speak more distinctly to teach him the way. The Rosicrucian Fellowship endeavors to prepare the world in general, and the sensitives of the two groups in particular, for the awakening of the latent powers in man, so that all may be guided safely through the danger zone, and be as well fitted as possible to use these new faculties. Effort is made to blend the love without which Paul declared a knowledge of all mysteries worthless, with a mystic knowledge rooted and grounded in love, so that the pupils of this school may become living exponents of this blended soul science of the Western wisdom school, and gradually educate humanity at large in the virtues necessary to make the possession of higher powers safe. The problem of life and its solution. The problem of life. Among all the vicissitudes of life, which vary in each individual's experience, there is one event which sooner or later comes to everyone: death. No matter what our station in life, whether the life lived has been a laudable one or the reverse, whether great achievements have marked our path among men, whether health or sickness have been our lot. Whether we have been famous and surrounded by a host of admiring friends, or have wandered unknown through the years of our life, at some time there comes a moment when we stand alone before the portal of death and are forced to take the leap into the dark. The thought of this leap and of what lies beyond must inevitably force itself upon every thinking person. In the years of youth and health, when the bark of our life sails upon seas of prosperity, when all appears beautiful and bright, we may put the thought behind us, but there will surely come a time in the life of every thinking person when the problem of life and death forces itself upon his consciousness and refuses to be set aside. Neither will it help him to accept the ready-made solution of anyone else without thought and in blind belief, for this is a basic problem which every one must solve for himself or herself in order to obtain satisfaction. Upon the eastern edge of the desert of Sahara, there stands the world-famous Sphinx, with its inscrutable face turned toward the east, ever greeting the sun as its rising rays herald the newborn day. It was said in the Greek myth that it was the wont of this monster to ask a riddle of each traveler. She devoured those who could not answer, but when Oedipus solved the riddle she destroyed herself. The riddle which she asked of men was the riddle of life and death, a query which is as relevant today as ever, and which each one must answer or be devoured in the jaws of death. But when once a person has found the solution to the problem, it will appear that in reality there is no death, that what appears so is but a change from one state of existence to another. Thus, for the man who finds the true solution to the riddle of life, the Sphinx of death has ceased to exist, and he can lift his voice in the triumphant cry, "O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory?" Various theories of life have been advocated to solve this problem of life. We may divide them into two classes, namely the monistic theory, which holds that all the facts of life can be explained by reference to this visible world wherein we live, and the dualistic theory, which refers part of the phenomenon of life to another world which is now invisible to us. Raphael, in his famous painting The School of Athens, has most aptly pictured to us the attitude of these two schools of thought. We see upon that marvelous painting a Greek court such as those wherein philosophers were once wont to congregate. Upon the various steps which lead into the building a large number of men are engaged in deep conversation, but in the center at the top of the steps stand two figures, supposedly of Plato and Aristotle, one pointing upwards, the other towards the earth, each looking the other in the face, mutely, but with deeply concentrated will. Each seeking to convince the other that his attitude is right, for each bears the conviction in his heart. One holds that he is of the earth earthy, that he has come from the dust, and that thereto he will return. The other firmly advocates the position that there is a higher something which has always existed and will continue, regardless of whether the body wherein it now dwells holds together or not. The question who is right is still an open one with the majority of mankind. Millions of tons of paper and printer's ink have been used in futile attempts to settle it by argument, but it will always remain open to all who have not solved the riddle themselves, for it is a basic problem, a part of the life experience of every human being to settle that question, and therefore no one can give us the solution ready-made for our acceptance. All that can be done by those who have really solved the problem is to show to others the line along which they have found the solution, and thus direct the inquirer how he also may arrive at a conclusion. That is the aim of this little book, not to offer a solution to the problem of life to be taken blindly, on faith in the author's ability of investigation. The teachings herein set forth are those handed down by the great Western mystery school of the Rosicrucian order, and are the result of the concurrent testimony of a long line of trained seers given to the author, and supplemented by his own independent investigation of the realms traversed by the spirit in its cyclic path from the invisible world to this plane of existence, and back again. Nevertheless, the student is warned that the writer may have misunderstood some of the teachings, and that despite the greatest care, he may have taken a wrong view of that which he believes to have seen in the invisible world, where the possibilities of making a mistake are legion. Here in the world which we view about us, the forms are stable and do not easily change, but in the world around us, which is perceptible only by the spiritual sight, we may say that there is in reality no form, but that all is life. At least the forms are so changeable that the metamorphosis recounted in fairy stories is discounted there to an amazing degree, and therefore we have the surprising revelations of mediums and other untrained clairvoyants, who, though they may be perfectly honest, are deceived by illusions of form which is evanescent, because they are incapable of viewing the life that is the permanent basis of that form. We must learn to see in this world. The newborn babe has no conception of distance and will reach for things far, far beyond its grasp, until it has learned to gauge its capacity. A blind man who acquires the faculty of sight, or has it restored by an operation, will at first be inclined to close his eyes when moving from place to place, and declare that it is easier to walk by feeling than by sight. That is because he has not learned to use his newly acquired faculty. Similarly, the man whose spiritual vision has been newly opened requires to be trained. In fact, he is in much greater need thereof than the babe and the blind man already mentioned. Denied that training, he would be like a newborn babe placed in a nursery where the walls are lined with mirrors of different convex and concave curvatures, which would distort its own shape and the forms of its attendants. If allowed to grow up in such surroundings and unable to see the real shapes of itself and its nurses, it would naturally believe that it saw many different and distorted shapes, where in reality the mirrors were responsible for the illusion. Were the persons concerned in such an experiment and the child taken out of the illusory surroundings, it would be incapable of recognizing them until the matter had been properly explained. There are similar dangers of illusion to those who have developed spiritual sight, until they have been trained to discount the refraction and to view the life which is permanent and stable, disregarding the form which is evanescent and changeable. The danger of getting things out of focus always remains, however, and is so subtle that the writer feels an imperative duty to warn his readers to take all statements concerning the unseen world with the proverbial grain of salt, for he has no intention to deceive. He is therefore inclined rather to magnify than to minimize his limitations, and would advise the student to accept nothing from the author's pen without reasoning it out for himself. Thus, if he is deceived, he will be self-deceived, and the author is blameless. 3 theories of life. Only 3 noteworthy theories have been offered as solutions to the riddle of existence, and in order that the reader may be able to make the important choice between them, we will state briefly what they are, and give some of the arguments which lead us to advocate the doctrine of rebirth as the method which favors soul growth and the ultimate attainment of perfection, thus offering the best solution to the problem of life. 1. The materialistic theory teaches that life is but a short journey from the cradle to the grave, that there is no higher intelligence in the universe than man, that his mind is produced by certain correlations of matter, and that therefore death and dissolution of the body terminate existence. There was a day when the arguments of materialistic philosophers seemed convincing, but as science advances, it discovers more and more that there is a spiritual side to the universe. That life and consciousness may exist without being able to give us a sign has been amply proven in the cases where a person who was entranced and thought dead for days has suddenly awakened and told all that had taken place around the body. Such eminent scientists as Sir Oliver Lodge, Camille Flammarion, Lombroso and other men of highest intelligence and scientific training have unequivocally stated as the result of their investigations that the intelligence which we call man survives death of the body and lives on in our midst, as independently of whether we see them or not, as light. These scientists have reached their conclusion after years of careful investigation. They have found that the so-called dead can, and under certain circumstances do, communicate with us in such a manner that mistake is out of the question. We maintain that their testimony is worth more than the argument of materialism to the contrary, for it is based upon years of careful investigation. It is in harmony with such well-established laws as the law of conservation of matter and the law of conservation of energy. Mind is a form of energy and immune from destruction as claimed by the materialist. Therefore, we disbar the materialistic theory as unsound, because out of harmony with the laws of nature and with well-established facts. 2. The theory of theology claims that just prior to each birth a soul is created by God and enters into the world where it lives for a time, varying from a few minutes to a few score of years, that at the end of this short span of life, it returns through the portal of death to the invisible beyond, where it remains forever in a condition of happiness or misery, according to the deeds done in the body during the few years it lived here. Plato insisted upon the necessity of a clear definition of terms as a basis of argument, and we contend that that is as necessary in discussing the problem of life from the Bible point of view as in arguments from the Platonic standpoint. According to the Bible, man is a composite being consisting of body, soul and spirit. The two latter are usually taken to be synonymous, but we insist that they are not interchangeable and present the following to support our dictum. All things are in a state of vibration. Vibrations from objects in our surroundings are constantly impinging upon us and carry to our senses a cognition of the external world. The vibrations in the ether act upon our eyes so that we see, and vibrations in the air transmit sounds to the ear. We also breathe the ether, which is charged with pictures of our surroundings and the sounds in our environment, so that by means of the breath we receive at each moment of our life, internally an accurate picture of our external surroundings. That is a scientific proposition. Science does not explain what becomes of these vibrations, however, but according to the Rosicrucian mystery teaching, they are transmitted to the blood and then etched upon a little atom in the heart, as automatically as a moving picture is imprinted upon the sensitized film, and a record of sounds is engraven upon the phonographic disc. This breath record starts with the first breath of the newborn babe and ends only with the last gasp of the dying man, and soul is a product of the breath. Genesis also shows the connection between breath and soul in the words, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul," the same word, Nephesh is translated breath and soul in the above quotation. In the post-mortem existence, the breath record is disposed of. The good acts of life produce feelings of pleasure, and the intensity of attraction incorporates them into the spirit as soul power. Thus the breath records of our good acts are the soul which is saved, for by the union with the spirit they become immortal. As they accumulate life after life, we become more soulful, and they are thus also the basis of Salgrith. The record of our evil acts is also derived from our breath in the moments when they were committed. The pain and suffering they bring cause the spirit to expel the breath record from its being in purgatory. As that cannot exist independently of the life-giving spirit, the breath record of our sins disintegrates upon expurgation, and thus we see that the soul that sinneth, it shall die. The memory of the suffering incidental to expurgation, however, remains with the spirit as conscience, to deter from repetition of the same evil in later lives. Thus both our good and evil acts are recorded through the agency of the breath, which is therefore the basis of the soul. But while the breath record of good acts amalgamates with the spirit and lives on forever as an immortal soul, the breath record of evil deeds is disintegrated. It is the soul that sinneth and dies. While the Bible teaches that immortality of the soul is conditional upon well-doing, it makes no distinction in respect of the spirit. The statement is clear and emphatic that when the silver cord be loosed, then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return to God who gave it. Thus the Bible teaches that the body is made of dust and returns thereto, that a part of the soul generated in the breath is perishable, but that the spirit survives bodily death and persists forever. Therefore a lost soul in the common acceptance of that term is not a Bible teaching, for the spirit is uncreate and eternal as God himself, and therefore the orthodox theory cannot be true. 3. The theory of rebirths, which teaches that each spirit is an integral part of God, that it enfolds all divine possibilities as the acorn enfolds the oak, that by means of many existences in an earthy body of gradually improving texture, its latent powers are being slowly unfolded and become available as dynamic energy, that none can be lost, but that all will ultimately attain to perfection and reunion with God, each bringing with it the accumulated experience which is the fruitage of its pilgrimage through matter. Or, as we may poetically express it, we are eternal. On whistling stormcloud, on Zephyr's wing, the spirit choir loud the world anthem sing. Hark! List to their voice, we have passed through death's door, there's no death. Rejoice! Life lives evermore. We are, have always been, will ever be. We are a portion of eternity older than creation, a part of one great whole, is each individual and immortal soul. On time's whirring loom our garments we've wrought eternally, weave we on network of thought, our kin and our country, by mind brought to birth, were patterned in heaven ere molded on earth. We have shone in the jewel and danced on the wave, we have sparkled in fire defying the grave, through shapes ever-changing, in size, kind and name our individual essence still is the same. And when we have reached to the highest of all, the gradations of growth our minds shall recall, so that link by link, we may join them together, and trace step by step the way we reached thither. Thus in time we shall know, if only we do what lifts, ennobles, is right and true. With kindness to all, with malice to none, that in and through us God's will may be done. We venture to make the assertion that there is but one sin, ignorance, and but one salvation, applied knowledge. Even the wisest among us know but little of what may be learned, however, and no one has attained to perfection, or can attain in one single short life, but we note that everywhere in nature slow persistent unfoldment makes for higher and higher development of everything, and we call this process evolution. One of the chief characteristics of evolution lies in the fact that it manifests in alternating periods of activity and rest. The busy summer, when all things upon earth are exerting themselves to bring forth, is followed by the rest and inactivity of winter. The busy day alternates with the quiet of night. The ebb of the ocean is succeeded by the flood tide. Thus, as all other things move in cycles, the life that expresses itself here upon earth for a few years is not to be thought of as ended when death has been reached, but as surely as the sun rises in the morning after having set at night, will the life that was ended by the death of one body be taken up again in a new vehicle and in a different environment. This earth may in fact be likened to a school to which we return life after life to learn new lessons, as our children go to school day after day to increase their knowledge. The child sleeps through the night which intervenes between 2 days at school, and the spirit also has its rest from active life between death and a new birth. There are also different classes in this world school which correspond to the various grades from kindergarten to college. In the lower classes we find spirits who have gone to the school of life, but a few times, they are savages now, but in time they will become wiser and better than we are, and we ourselves shall progress in future lives to spiritual heights, of which we cannot even conceive at the present. If we apply ourselves to learn the lessons of life, we shall of course advance much faster in the school of life than if we dilly-dally and idle our time away. This, on the same principle which governs in one of our own institutions of learning. We are not here then, by the caprice of God. He has not placed one in clover and another in a desert, nor has he given one a healthy body, so that he may live at ease from pain and sickness, while he placed another in poor circumstances with never a rest from pain. But what we are, on account of our own diligence or negligence, and what we shall be in the future depends upon what we will to be, and not upon divine caprice or upon inexorable fate. No matter what the circumstances, it lies with us to master them, or to be mastered, as we will. Sir Edwin Arnold puts the teaching most beautifully in his Light of Asia. The books say well, my brothers. Each man's life the outcome of his former living is, the bygone wrongs bring forth sorrows and woes, the bygone right breeds bliss. Each has such lordship as the loftiest ones, nay, for with powers around, above, below, as with all flesh, and whatsoever lives act maketh joy or woe. Who toiled a slave may come anew a prince for gentle worthiness and merit won. Who ruled a king may wander earth in rags for things done or undone. Or, as an unknown poet says, one ship sails east and another sails west with the self-same winds that blow. 'Tis the set of the sail, and not the gale, which determines the way they go. As the winds of the sea are the ways of fate as we voyage along through life. 'Tis the act of the soul, which determines the goal and not the calm or the strife. When we wish to engage someone to undertake a certain mission, we choose someone whom we think particularly fitted to fulfill the requirements, and we must suppose that a divine being would use at least as much common sense, and not choose anyone to go his errand who was not fitted therefor. So when we read in the Bible that Samson was foreordained to be the slayer of the Philistines, and that Jeremiah was predestined to be a prophet, It is but logical to suppose that they must have been particularly suited to such occupation. John the Baptist also was born to be a herald of the coming Savior and to preach the kingdom of God, which is to take the place of the kingdom of men. Had these people had no previous training, how could they have developed such a fitness to fulfill their various missions? And if they had been fitted, how else could they have received their training if not in earlier lives? The Jews believed in the doctrine of rebirth, or they would not have asked John the Baptist if he were Elijah, as recorded in the first chapter of John. The apostles of Christ also held the belief, as we may see from the incident recorded in the 16th chapter of Matthew, where the Christ asked them the question, "Whom do men say that I the Son of Man am?" The apostles replied, "Some say that thou art John the Baptist, some, Elias, and others Jeremias or one of the prophets." Upon this occasion the Christ tacitly assented to the teaching of rebirth, because he did not correct the disciples, as would have been his plain duty in his capacity as teacher, when the pupils entertained a mistaken idea. But to Nicodemus he said unequivocally, "Except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." And in the 11th chapter of Matthew, the 14th verse, he said, speaking of John the Baptist, "This is Elijah." In the 17th chapter of Matthew, the 12th verse, he said, "Elijah has come already, and they knew him not, but have done to him whatsoever they listed." Then the disciples understood that he spoke to them of John the Baptist. Thus we maintain that the doctrine of rebirth offers the only solution to the problem of life, which is in harmony with the laws of nature, which answers the ethical requirements of the case, and permits us to love God without blinding our reason to the inequalities of life and the varying circumstances which give to a few the ease and comfort, the health and wealth, which are denied to the many. The theory of heredity advanced by materialists applies only to the form, for as a carpenter uses material from a certain pile of lumber to build a house in which he afterwards lives, so does the spirit take the substance wherewith to build its house from the parents. The carpenter cannot build a house of hard wood from spruce lumber, and the spirit also must build a body which is like those from which the material was taken. But the theory of heredity does not apply upon the moral plane, for it is a notorious fact that in the rogues' galleries of America and Europe, there is no case where both father and son are represented. Thus the sons of criminals, though they have the tendencies to crime, keep out of the clutches of the law. Neither will heredity hold good upon the plane of the intellect, for many cases may be cited where a genius and an idiot spring from the same stock. The great Cuvier, whose brain was of about the same weight as Daniel Webster's, and whose intellect was as great, had 5 children who all died of paresis. The brother of Alexander the Great was an idiot, and thus we hold that another solution must be found to account for the facts of life. The law of rebirth coupled with its companion law, the law of causation, does that. When we die after one life, we return to earth later, under circumstances determined by the manner in which we lived before. The gambler is drawn to pool parlors and racetracks to associate with others of like taste. The musician is attracted to the concert halls and music studios by congenial spirits, and the returning ego also carries with it its likes and dislikes, which cause it to seek parents among the class to which it belongs. But then someone will point to cases where we find people of entirely opposite tastes living lives of torture, because grouped in the same family, and forced by circumstances to stay there contrary to their wills. But that does not vitiate the law in the slightest. In each life we contract certain obligations which cannot then be fulfilled. Perhaps we have run away from a duty such as the care of an invalid relative, and have met death without coming to a realization of our mistake. That relative, upon the other hand, may have suffered severely from our neglect, and have stored up a bitterness against us before death terminates the suffering. Death and the subsequent removal to another environment does not pay our debts in this life, any more than the removal from the city where we now live to another place will pay the debts we have contracted prior to our removal. It is therefore quite possible that the two who have injured each other as described may find themselves members of the same family. Then, whether they remember the past grudge or not, the old enmity will assert itself and cause them to hate anew, until the consequent discomfort forces them to tolerate each other, and perhaps later they may learn to love where they hated. The question also arises in the mind of inquirers. If we have been here before, why do we not remember? And the answer is that while most people are not aware of how their previous existences were spent, there are others who have a very distinct recollection of previous lives. A friend of the writer's, for instance, when living in France, one day started to read to her son about a certain city where they were then going upon a bicycle tour, and the boy exclaimed, "You do not need to tell me about that, mother. I know that city, I lived there and was killed." He then commenced to describe the city and also a certain bridge. Later he took his mother to that bridge and showed her the spot where he had met death centuries before. Another friend traveling in Ireland saw a scene which she recognized, and she also described to the party the scene around the bend of the road which she had never seen in this life, so it must have been a memory from a previous life. Numerous other instances could be given where such minor flashes of memory reveal to us glimpses from a past life. The verified case in which a little 3-year-old girl in Santa Barbara described her life and death has been given in the Rosicrucian cosmoconception. It is perhaps the most conclusive evidence, as it hinges on the veracity of a child too young to have learned deception. This theory of life does not rest upon speculation, however. It is one of the first facts of life demonstrated to the pupil of a mystery school. He is taught to watch a child in the act of dying, also, to watch it in the invisible world from day to day, until it comes to a new birth a year or two later. Then he knows with absolute certainty that we return to earth to reap in a future life what we now sow. The reason for taking a child to watch in preference to an adult is that the child is reborn very quickly, for its short life on earth has borne but few fruits, and these are soon assimilated, while the adult who has lived a long life and had much experience remains in the invisible worlds for centuries, so that the pupil could not watch him from death to rebirth. The cause of infant mortality will be explained later. Here we merely desire to emphasize the fact that it is within the range of possibilities of everyone without exception to become able to know at first hand that which is here taught. The average interval between two Earth lives is about 1,000 years. It is determined by the movement of the sun, known to astronomers as precession of the equinox, by which the sun moves through one of the signs of the zodiac in about 2100 years. During that time the conditions upon Earth have changed so much that the spirit will find entirely new experiences here, and therefore it returns. The great leaders of evolution always obtain the maximum benefit from each condition designed by them, And as the experiences in the same social conditions are very different in the case of a man from what they are for a woman, the human spirit takes birth twice during the 2100 years, measured by the precession of the equinoxes already explained. It is born once as a man, and another time as a woman. Such is the rule, but it is subject to whatever modifications may be necessary to facilitate reaping what the spirit has sown, as required under the law of causation, which works hand in hand with the law of rebirth. Thus, at times a spirit may be brought to birth long ere the 1,000 years have expired, in order to fulfill a certain mission, or it may be detained in the invisible worlds after the time when it should have come to birth, according to the strict requirements of a blind law. The laws of nature are not that, however. They are great intelligences who always subordinate minor considerations to higher ends, and under their beneficent guidance, we are constantly progressing from life to life under conditions exactly suited to each individual, until in time we shall attain to a higher evolution and become supermen. Oliver Wendell Holmes has so beautifully voiced that aspiration and its consummation in the lines, "Build thee more stately mansions, O my soul, as the swift seasons roll, leave thy low vaulted past. Let each new temple, nobler than the last, shut thee from heaven with a dome more vast. Till thou at length art free, leaving thy outgrown shell by life's unresting sea." The visible and the invisible world. The chemical region. If one who is capable of consciously using his spiritual body with the same facility that we now use our physical vehicles, should glide away from the Earth into interplanetary space, the Earth and the various other planets of our solar system would appear to him to be composed of three kinds of matter, roughly speaking. The densest matter, which is our visible Earth, would appear to him as being the center of the ball, as the yolk is in the center of an egg. Around that nucleus he would observe a finer grade of matter similarly disposed in relation to the central mass, as the white of the egg is disposed outside the yolk. Upon a little closer investigation he would also discover that this second kind of substance permeates the solid earth to the very center, even as the blood percolates through the more solid parts of our flesh. Outside both of these mingling layers of matter, he would observe a still finer third layer corresponding to the shell of the egg, except that this third layer is the finest, most subtle of the three grades of matter, and that it interpenetrates both of the two inner layers. As already said, the central mass, spiritually seen, is our visible world, composed of solids, liquids and gases. They constitute the earth, its atmosphere, and also the ether, of which physical science speaks hypothetically as permeating the atomic substance of all chemical elements. The second layer of matter is called the desire world, and the outermost layer is called the world of thought. A little reflection upon the subject will make clear that just such a constitution is necessary to account for facts of life as we see them. All forms in the world about us are built from chemical substances, solids, liquids and gases, but in so far that they do move, these forms obey a separate and distinct impulse, and when this impelling energy leaves, the form becomes inert. The steam engine rotates under the impetus of an invisible gas called steam. Before steam filled its cylinder, the engine stood still, and when the impelling force is shut off, its motion again ceases. The dynamo rotates under the still more subtle influence of an electric current, which may also cause the click of a telegraph instrument or the ring of an electric bell. But the dynamo ceases its swift whirl, and the persistent ring of the electric bell becomes mute, when the invisible electricity is switched off. The form of the bird, the animal and the human being also cease their motion when the inner force which we call life has winged its invisible way. All forms are impelled into motion by desire. The bird and the animal roam land and air in their desire to secure food and shelter, or for the purpose of breeding. Man is also moved by these desires, but has in addition other and higher incentives to spur him to effort. Among them is desire for rapidity of motion, which led him to construct the steam engine and other devices that move in obedience to his desire. If there were no iron in the mountains, man could not build machines. If there were no clay in the soil, the bony structure of the skeleton would be an impossibility, and if there were no physical world at all, with its solids, liquids and gases, this dense body of ours could never have come into existence. Reasoning along similar lines, it must be at once apparent that if there were no desire world composed of desire stuff, we should have no way of forming feelings, emotions and desires. A planet composed of the materials we perceive with our physical eyes and of no other substances might be the home of plants which grow unconsciously, but have no desires to cause them to move. The human and animal kingdoms, however, would be impossibilities. Furthermore, there is in the world a vast number of things, from the simplest and most crude instruments to the most intricate and cunning devices which have been constructed by the hand of man. These reveal the fact of man's thought and ingenuity. Thought must have a source as well as form and feeling. We saw that it was necessary to have the requisite material in order to build a steam engine or a body, and we reasoned from the fact that in order to obtain material to express desire, there must also be a world composed of desire stuff. Carrying our argument to its logical conclusion, we also hold that unless a world of thought provides a reservoir of mind stuff upon which we may draw, it would be impossible for us to think and invent the things which we see in even the lowest civilization. Thus it will be clear that the division of a planet into worlds is not based on fanciful metaphysical speculation, but is logically necessary in the economy of nature. Therefore, it must be taken into consideration by anyone who would study and aim to understand the inner nature of things. When we see the streetcars moving along our streets, it does not explain to say that the motor is driven by electricity of so many amperes at so many volts. These names only add to our confusion until we have thoroughly studied the science of electricity, and then we shall find that the mystery deepens, for while the streetcar belongs to the world of inert form perceptible to our vision, the electric current which moves it is indigenous to the realm of force, the invisible desire world, and the thought which created and guides it comes from the still more subtle world of thought, which is the home world of the human spirit, the ego. It may be objected that this line of argument makes a simple matter exceedingly intricate, but a little reflection will soon show the fallacy of such a contention. Viewed superficially, any of the sciences seem extremely simple. Anatomically, we may divide the body into flesh and bone. Chemically, we may make the simple divisions between solid, liquid and gas. But to thoroughly master the science of anatomy, it is necessary to spend years in close application and learn to know all the little nerves, the ligaments which bind articulations between various parts of the bony structure. To study the several kinds of tissue and their disposition in our system, where they form the bones, muscles, glands, etc., which in the aggregate we know as the human body. To properly understand the science of chemistry, we must study the valence of the atom, which determines the power of combination of the various elements, together with other niceties, such as atomic weight, density, etc. New wonders are constantly opening up to the most experienced chemist, who understands best the immensity of his chosen science. The youngest lawyer, fresh from law school, knows more about the most intricate cases, in his own estimation, than the judges upon the Supreme Court bench who spend long hours, weeks and months, seriously deliberating over their decisions. But those who, without having studied, think they understand and are fitted to discourse upon the greatest of all sciences, the science of life and being, make a greater mistake. After years of patient study, of holy life spent in close application, a man is oftentimes perplexed at the immensity of the subject he studies. He finds it to be so vast in both the direction of the great and small, that it baffles description, that language fails, and that the tongue must remain mute. Therefore we hold, and we speak from knowledge gained through years of close study and investigation, that the finer distinctions which we have made, and shall make, are not at all arbitrary, but absolutely necessary as are divisions and distinctions made in anatomy or chemistry. No form in the physical world has feeling in the true sense of that word. It is the indwelling life which feels, as we may readily see from the fact that a body which responded to the slightest touch while instinct with life exhibits no sensation whatever even when cut to pieces after the life has fled. Demonstrations have been made by scientists, particularly by Professor Bose of Calcutta, to show that there is feeling in dead animal tissue, and even in tin and other metal, but we maintain that the diagrams which seem to support his contentions in reality demonstrate only a response to impacts similar to the rebound of a rubber ball, and that must not be confused with such feelings as love, hate, sympathy and aversion. Goethe also, in his novel Elective Affinities, Wahlverwandtschaft, brings out some beautiful illustrations, wherein he makes it seem as if atoms loved and hated, from the fact that some elements combine readily while other substances refuse to amalgamate, a phenomenon produced by the different rates of speed at which various elements vibrate, and an unequal inclination of their axes. Only where there is sentient life can there be feelings of pleasure and pain, sorrow or joy. The etheric region. In addition to the solids, liquids and gases which compose the chemical region of the physical world, there is also a finer grade of matter called ether, which permeates the atomic structure of the earth and its atmosphere substantially as science teaches. Scientists have never seen, nor have they weighed, measured or analyzed this substance, but they infer that it must exist in order to account for transmission of light and various other phenomena. If it were possible for us to live in a room from which the air had been exhausted, we might speak at the top of our voices, we might ring the largest bell, or we might even discharge a cannon close to our ear, and we should hear no sound, for air is the medium which transmits sound vibrations to the tympanum of our ear, and that would be lacking. But if an electric light were lighted, we should at once perceive its rays, it would illumine the room despite the lack of air. Hence there must be a substance, capable of being set into vibration, between the electric light and our eyes. That medium scientists call ether, but it is so subtle that no instrument has been devised whereby it may be measured or analyzed, and therefore the scientists are without much information concerning it, though forced to postulate its existence. We do not seek to belittle the achievements of modern scientists, we have the greatest admiration for them, and we entertain high expectations of what ambitions they may yet realize, But we perceive a limitation in the fact that all discoveries of the past have been made by the invention of wonderful instruments, applied in a most ingenious manner to solve seemingly insoluble and baffling problems. The strength of science lies vested in its instruments, for the scientist may say to anyone, "Go, procure a number of glasses ground in a certain manner, insert them in a tube, direct that tube toward a certain point in the sky, where now nothing appears to your naked eye. You will then see a beautiful star called Uranus." If his directions are followed, anyone is quickly and without preparation able to demonstrate for himself the truth of the scientist's assertion. But while the instruments of science are its tower of strength, they also mark the end of its field of investigation, for it is impossible to contact the spirit world with physical instruments. So the research of occultists begins where the physical scientist finds his limit and are carried on by spiritual means. These investigations are as thorough and as reliable as researches by material scientists, but not as easily demonstrable to the general public. Spiritual powers lie dormant within every human being, and when awakened, they compensate for both telescope and microscope. They enable their possessor to investigate, instanter, things beyond the veil of matter, but they are only developed by a patient application and continuance in well-doing extended over years, and few are they who have faith to start upon the path to attainment or perseverance to go through with the ordeal. Therefore, the occultist's assertions are not generally credited. We can readily see that long probation must precede attainment, for a person equipped with spiritual sight is able to penetrate walls of houses as easily as we walk through the atmosphere, able to read at will the innermost thoughts of those about him. If not actuated by the most pure and unselfish motives, he would be a scourge to humanity. Therefore, that power is safeguarded as we would withhold the dynamite bomb from an anarchist and from the well-intentioned but ignorant person, or as we withhold match and powder barrel from a child. In the hands of an experienced engineer, the dynamite bomb may be used to open a highway of commerce, and an intelligent farmer may use gunpowder to good account in clearing his field of tree stumps. But in the hands of an ill-intentioned criminal or ignorant child, an explosive may wreck much property and end many lives. The force is the same, but used differently, according to the ability or intention of the user. It may produce results of a diametrically opposite nature. So it is also with spiritual powers. There is a time lock upon them, as upon a bank safe, which keeps out all until they have earned the privilege, and the time is ripe for its exercise. As already said, the ether is physical matter, and responsive to the same laws which govern other physical substances upon this plane of existence. Therefore, it requires but a slight extension of physical sight to see ether, which is disposed in 4 grades of density. The blue haze seen in mountain canyons is in fact ether of the kind known to occult investigators as chemical ether. Many people who see this ether are unaware that they are possessed of a faculty not enjoyed by all. Others, who have developed spiritual sight, are not endowed with etheric vision, a fact which seems an anomaly until the subject of clairvoyance is thoroughly understood. The reason is that as ether is physical matter, etheric sight depends upon the sensitiveness of the optic nerve, while spiritual sight is acquired by developing latent vibratory powers in 2 little organs situated in the brain: the pituitary body and the pineal gland. Nearsighted people even may have etheric vision. Though unable to read the print in a book, they may be able to see through a wall owing to the fact that their optic nerve responds more rapidly to fine than to coarse vibrations. When anyone views an object with etheric sight, he sees through that object in a manner similar to the way an X-ray penetrates opaque substances. If he looks at a sewing machine, he will perceive first an outer casing, then the works within and behind both, the casing furthest away from him. If he has developed a grade of spiritual vision which opens the desire world to him and he looks at the same object, he will see it both inside and out. If he looks closely, he will perceive every little atom spinning upon its axis, and no part or particle will be excluded from his perception. But if his spiritual sight has been developed in such a measure that he is capable of viewing the sewing machine with the vision peculiar to the world of thought, he will behold a cavity where he had previously seen the form. Things seen with etheric vision are very much alike in color. They are nearly reddish blue, purple or violet, according to the density of the ether. But when we view any object with the spiritual sight pertaining to the desire world, it scintillates and coruscates in 1,000 ever-changing colors so indescribably beautiful that they can only be compared to living fire, and the writer therefore calls this grade of vision color sight. But when the spiritual vision of the world of thought is the medium of perception, the seer finds that in addition to still more beautiful colors, there issues from the cavity, described a constant flow of a certain harmonious tone. Thus this world wherein we now consciously live and which we perceive by means of our physical senses, is preeminently the world of form, the desire world is particularly the world of color, and the world of thought is the realm of tone. Because of the relative proximity or distance of these worlds, a statue, a form, withstands the ravages of time for millenniums, but the colors upon a painting fade in far shorter time, for they come from the desire world, and music which is native to the world furthest removed from us, the world of thought, is like a will-o'-the-wisp which none may catch or hold, it is gone again as soon as it has made its appearance. But there is in color and music a compensation for this increasing evanescence. The statue is cold and dead as the mineral of which it is composed, and has attractions for but few, though its form is a tangible reality. The forms upon a painting are illusory, yet they express life, on account of the color which has come from a region where nothing is inert and lifeless. Therefore the painting is enjoyed by many. Music is intangible and ephemeral, but it comes from the home world of the spirit, and though so fleeting it is recognized by the spirit as a soul speech fresh from the celestial realms, an echo from the home whence we are now exiled, and therefore it touches a chord in our being, regardless of whether we realize the true cause or not. Thus we see that there are various grades of spiritual sight, each suited to the superphysical realm which it opens to our perception. Etheric vision, color vision and tonal vision. The occult investigator finds that ether is of 4 kinds, or grades of density. The chemical ether, the life ether, the light ether, the reflecting ether. The chemical ether is the avenue of expression for forces promoting assimilation, growth and the maintenance of form. The life ether is the vantage ground of forces active in propagation, or the building of new forms. The light ether transmits the motive power of the sun along the various nerves of living bodies, and makes motion possible. The reflecting ether receives an impression of all that is, lives and moves. It also records each change, in a similar manner as the film upon a moving picture machine. In this record mediums and psychometrists may read the past, upon the same principle as, under proper conditions, moving pictures are reproduced time and again. We have been speaking of ether as an avenue of forces, a word which conveys no meaning to the average mind, because force is invisible. But to an occult investigator, the forces are not merely names such as steam, electricity, etc. He finds them to be intelligent beings of varying grades, both sub- and superhuman. What we call laws of nature are great intelligences which guide more elemental beings in accordance with certain rules designed to further their evolution. In the Middle Ages, when many people were still endowed with a remnant of negative clairvoyance, they spoke of gnomes and elves or fairies, which roamed about the mountains and forests. These were the earth spirits. They also told of the undine or water sprite, which inhabited rivers and streams, of sylphs which were said to dwell in the mists above moat and moor, as air spirits, but not much was said of the salamanders, as they are fire spirits, and therefore not so easily detected or so readily accessible to the majority of people. The old folk stories are now regarded as superstitions, but as a matter of fact, one endowed with etheric vision may yet perceive the little gnomes building green chlorophyll into the leaves of plants and giving to flowers the multiplicity of delicate tints which delight our eyes. Scientists have attempted time and again to offer an adequate explanation of the phenomenon of wind and storm, but have failed signally, nor can they succeed, while they seek a mechanical solution to what is really a manifestation of life. Could they see the hosts of sylphs winging their way hither and thither, they would know who and what is responsible for the fickleness of the wind. Could they watch a storm at sea from the etheric viewpoint, they would perceive that the saying "the war of the elements" is not an empty phrase, for the heaving sea is truly then a battlefield of sylphs and undines, and the howling tempest is the war cry of spirits in the air. Also, the salamanders are found everywhere, and no fire is lighted without their help, but they are mostly active underground. They are responsible for explosions and volcanic eruptions. The classes of beings which we have mentioned are still subhuman, but will all at some time reach a stage in evolution corresponding to the human, though under different circumstances from those under which we evolve. But at present the wonderful intelligences we speak of as the laws of nature marshal the armies of less evolved entities mentioned. To arrive at a better understanding of what these various beings are and their relation to us, we may take an illustration. Let us suppose that a mechanic is making an engine, and meanwhile a dog is watching him. It sees the man at his labor and how he uses various tools to shape his materials, also how, from the crude iron, steel, brass and other metals, the engine slowly takes shape. The dog is a being from a lower evolution and does not comprehend the purpose of the mechanic, but it sees both the workman, his labor and the result thereof, which manifests as an engine. Let us now suppose that the dog were able to see the materials which slowly change their shape, assemble and become an engine, but that it is unable to perceive the workman and to see the work he does. The dog would then be in the same relation to the mechanic as we are to the great intelligences we call laws of nature, and their assistants, the nature spirits, for we behold the manifestations of their work as force moving matter in various ways, but always under immutable conditions. In the ether we may also observe the angels, whose densest body is made of that material, as our dense body is formed of gases, liquids and solids. These beings are one step beyond the human stage, as we are a degree in advance of the animal evolution. We have never been animals like our present fauna, however, but at a previous stage in the development of our planet, we had an animal-like constitution. Then the angels were human, though they have never possessed a dense body such as ours, nor ever functioned in any material denser than ether. At some time, in a future condition, the earth will again become ethereal. Then man will be like the angels. Therefore the Bible tells us that man was made a little while lower than the angels. Paul's letter to the Hebrews, 2nd chapter, 7th verse. See marginal reading. As ether is the avenue of vital creative forces, and as angels are such expert builders of ether, we may readily understand that they are eminently fitted to be warders of the propagative forces in plant, animal and man. All through the Bible we find them thus engaged. 2 angels came to Abraham and announced the birth of Isaac. They promised a child to the man who had obeyed God. Later these same angels destroyed Sodom for abuse of the creative force. Angels foretold to the parents of Samuel and Samson the birth of these giants of brain and brawn. To Elizabeth came the angel, not archangel, Gabriel, and announced the birth of John. Later he appeared also to Mary with the message that she was chosen to bear Jesus. The desire world. When spiritual sight is developed so that it becomes possible to behold the desire world, many wonders confront the newcomer, for conditions are so widely different from what they are here that a description must sound quite as incredible as a fairy tale to anyone who has not himself seen them. Many cannot even believe that such a world exists, and that other people can see that which is invisible to them. Yet some people are blind to the beauties of this world which we see. A man who was born blind may say to us, "I know that this world exists, I can hear, I can smell, I can taste, and above all I can feel, but when you speak of light and of color, they are non-existent to me. You say that you see these things, I cannot believe it, for I cannot see myself. You say that light and color are all about me, but none of the senses at my command reveal them to me, and I do not believe that the sense you call sight exists. I think you suffer from hallucinations." We might sympathize very sincerely with the poor man who is thus afflicted, but his skepticism, reasonings and objections and sneers notwithstanding, we would be obliged to maintain that we perceive light and color. The man whose spiritual sight has been awakened is in a similar position with respect to those who do not perceive the desire world of which he speaks. If the blind man acquires the faculty of sight by an operation, his eyes are opened, and he will be compelled to assert the existence of light and color which he formerly denied. And when spiritual sight is acquired by anyone, he also perceives for himself the facts related by others. Neither is it an argument against the existence of spiritual realms that seers are at variance in their descriptions of conditions in the invisible world. We need but to look into books on travel and compare stories brought home by explorers of China, India or Africa, and we shall find them differing widely and often contradictory, because each traveler saw things from his own standpoint, under other conditions than those met by his brother authors. And we maintain that the man who has read most widely these varying tales concerning a certain country and wrestled with the contradictions of narrators will have a more comprehensive idea of the country or people of whom he has read than the man who has only read one story assented to by all the authors. Similarly, the varying stories of visitors to the desire world are of value because giving a fuller view, and more rounded, than if all had seen things from the same angle. In this world, matter and force are widely different. The chief characteristic of matter here is inertia, the tendency to remain at rest until acted upon by a force which sets it in motion. In the desire world, on the contrary, force and matter are almost indistinguishable one from the other. We might almost describe desire stuff as force matter, for it is in incessant motion, responsive to the slightest feeling of the vast multitude of beings which populate this wonderful world in nature. We often speak of the teeming millions of China and India, even of our vast cities, London, New York, Paris or Chicago. We consider them overcrowded in the extreme, yet even the densest population of any spot upon Earth is sparsely inhabited compared with the crowded conditions of the desire world. No inconvenience is felt by any of the denizens of that realm, however, for while in this world two things cannot occupy the same space at the same time, it is different there. A number of people and things may exist in the same place at the same time and be engaged in most diverse activities, regardless of what others are doing, such is the wonderful elasticity of desire stuff. As an illustration, we may mention a case where the writer, while attending religious service, plainly perceived at the altar certain beings interested in furthering that service and working to achieve that end. At the same time, there drifted through the room and the altar a table at which 4 persons were engaged in playing cards. They were as oblivious to the existence of the beings engaged in furthering our religious service as though these did not exist. The desire world is the abode of those who have died for some time subsequent to that event, and we may mention in the above connection that the so-called dead very often stay for a long while among their still living friends. Unseen by their relatives, they go about the familiar rooms. At first, they are often unaware of the condition mentioned, that 2 persons may be in the same place at the same time, and when they seat themselves in a chair or at the table, a living relative may take the supposedly vacant seat. The man we mistakenly call dead will at first hurry out of his seat to escape being sat upon, but he soon learns that being sat upon does not hurt him in his altered condition, and that he may remain in his chair, regardless of the fact that his living relative is also sitting there. In the lower regions of the desire world, the whole body of each being may be seen, but in the highest regions only the head seems to remain. Raphael, who like many other people in the Middle Ages was gifted with a so-called second sight, pictured that condition for us in his Sistine Madonna, now in the Dresden Art Gallery, where Madonna and the Christ child are represented as floating in a golden atmosphere and surrounded by a host of genie heads. Conditions which the occult investigator knows to be in harmony with actual facts. Among the entities who are, so to speak, native to that realm of nature, none are perhaps better known to the Christian world than the archangels. These exalted beings were human at a time in the Earth's history when we were yet plant-like. Since then we have advanced 2 steps, through the animal and to the human stage of development. The present archangels have also made 2 steps in progression, one, in which they were similar to what the angels are now, and another step which made them what we call archangels. Their densest body, though differing from ours in shape and made of desire stuff, is used by them as a vehicle of consciousness in the same manner that we use our body. They are expert manipulators of forces in the desire world, and these forces, as we shall see, move all the world to action. Therefore, the archangels work with humanity industrially and politically as arbitrators of the destiny of peoples and nations. The angels may be said to be family spirits whose mission is to unite a few spirits as members of a family and cement them with ties of blood and love of kin, while the archangels may be called race and national spirits, as they unite whole nations by patriotism or love of home and country. They are responsible for the rise and fall of nations. They give war or peace, victory or defeat, as it serves the best interests of the people they rule. This we may see, for instance, from the book of Daniel, where the archangel Michael, not to be confounded with the Michael, who is ambassador from the sun to the earth, is called the Prince of the children of Israel. Another archangel tells Daniel, in the 10th chapter, that he intends to fight the Prince of Persia by means of the Greeks. There are varying grades of intelligence among human beings. Some are qualified to hold high and lofty positions entirely beyond the ability of others. So it is also among higher beings. Not all archangels are fitted to govern a nation and rule the destiny of a race, people or tribe. Some are not fitted to rule human beings at all. But as the animals also have a desire nature, these lower grades of archangels govern the animals as group spirits and evolve to higher capacity thereby. The work of the race spirits is readily observable in the people it governs. The lower in the scale of evolution the people, the more they show a certain racial likeness. That is due to the work of the race spirit. One national spirit is responsible for the swarthy complexion common to Italians, for instance, while another causes the Scandinavians to be blonde. In the more advanced types of humanity, there is a wider divergence from the common type due to the individualized ego, which thus expresses in form and feature its own particular idiosyncrasies. Among the lower types of humanity such as Mongolians, native African Negroes and South Sea Islanders, the resemblance of individuals in each tribe makes it almost impossible for civilized Westerners to distinguish between them. Among animals, where the separate spirit is not individualized and self-conscious, the resemblance is not only much more marked physically, but extends even to traits and characteristics. We may write the biography of a man, for the experiences of each varies from that of others, and his acts are different, but we cannot write the biography of an animal, for members of each tribe all act alike under similar circumstances. If we desire to know the facts about Edward VII, it would profit us nothing to study the life of the prince consort, his father, or of George V, his son, as both would be entirely different from Edward. In order to find out what manner of man he was, we must study his own individual life. If, on the other hand, we wish to know the characteristics of beavers, we may observe any individual of the tribe, and when we have studied its idiosyncrasies, we shall know the traits of the whole tribe of beavers. What we call instinct is in reality the dictates of group spirits which govern separate individuals of its tribe telepathically, as it were. The ancient Egyptians knew of these animal group spirits and sketched many of them, in a crude way, upon their temples and tombs. Such figures with a human body and an animal head actually live in the desire world. They may be spoken to and will be found much more intelligent than the average human being. That statement brings up another peculiarity of conditions in the desire world in respect of language. Here in this world, human speech is so diversified that there are countries where people who live only a few miles apart speak a dialect so different that they understand each other with great difficulty, and each nation has its own language that varies altogether from the speech of other peoples. In the lower regions of the desire world, There is the same diversity of tongues as on earth, and the so-called dead of one nation find it impossible to converse with those who lived in another country. Hence linguistic accomplishments are of great value to the invisible helpers, of whom we shall hear later, as their sphere of usefulness is enormously extended by that ability. Even apart from difference of language, our mode of speech is exceedingly productive of misunderstandings. The same words often convey most opposite ideas to different minds. If we speak of a body of water, one person may think we mean a lake of small dimensions. The thoughts of another may be directed to the great American lakes, and a third person's thoughts may be turned towards the Atlantic or Pacific Oceans. If we speak of a light, one may think of a gas light, another of an electric arc lamp, or if we say red, one person may think we mean a delicate shade of pink, and another gets the idea of crimson. The misunderstandings of what words mean goes even farther, as illustrated in the following. The writer once opened a reading room in a large city where he lectured and invited his audience to make use thereof. Among those who availed themselves of the opportunity was a gentleman who had for many years been a veritable metaphysical tramp, roaming from lecture to lecture, hearing the teachings of everybody and practicing nothing. Like the Athenians on Mars Hill, he was always looking for something new, particularly in the line of phenomena, and his mind was in that seething chaotic state, which is one of the most prominent symptoms of mental indigestion. Having attended a number of our lectures, he knew from the program that the lecturer does not give readings or cast horoscopes for pay. But seeing on the door of the newly opened reading room the legend, "Free Reading Room," his erratic mind at once jumped to the conclusion that although we were opposed to telling fortunes for pay, we were now going to give free readings of the future in the free reading room. He was much disappointed that we did not intend to tell fortunes, either gratis or for a consideration, and we changed our sign to Free Library in order to obviate a repetition of the error. In the higher regions of the desire world, the confusion of tongues gives place to a universal mode of expression, which absolutely prevents misunderstandings of our meaning. There each of our thoughts takes a definite form and color perceptible to all, and this thought symbol emits a certain tone, which is not a word, but it conveys our meaning to the one we address, no matter what language he spoke on earth. To arrive at an understanding of how such a universal language becomes possible and is at once comprehended by all, without preparation, we may take as an illustration the manner in which a musician reads music. A German or a Polish composer may write an opera. Each has his own peculiar terminology and expresses it in his own language. When that opera is to be played by an Italian band master or by a Spanish or American musician, it need not be translated. The notes and symbols upon the page are a universally understood language of symbols, which is intelligible to musicians of no matter what nationality. Similarly with figures, the German counts 1, 2, 3, the Frenchman says 1, 2, 3, and in English we use the words 1, 2, 3, but the figures 1, 2, 3, though differently spoken, are intelligible to all and mean the same. There is no possibility of misunderstanding in the cases of either music or figures. Thus it is also with the universal language peculiar to the higher regions of the desire world and the still more subtle realms in nature. It is intelligible to all, an exact mode of expression. Returning to our description of the entities commonly met with in the lower desire world, We may note that other systems of religion than the Egyptian, already mentioned, have spoken of various classes of beings native to these realms. The Zoroastrian religion, for instance, mentions 7 Ameshaspans and the Izzards as having dominion over certain days in the month and certain months in the year. The Christian religion speaks of 7 spirits before the throne, which are the same beings the Persians called Ameshaspans. Each of them rules over 2 months in the year, while the 7th, Michael, the highest, is their leader, for he is ambassador from the sun to the earth. The others are ambassadors from the planets. The Catholic religion, with its abundant occult information, takes most notice of these star angels and knows considerable about their influence upon the affairs of the earth. The Ameshaspans, however, do not inhabit the lower regions of the desire world, but influence the Izzards. According to the old Persian legend, these beings are divisible into one group of 28 classes and another group of 3 classes. Each of these classes has dominion over, or takes the lead of all the other classes on one certain day of the month. They regulate the weather conditions on that day and work with animal and man in particular. At least the 28 classes do that. The other group of 3 classes has nothing to do with animals, because they have only 28 pair of spinal nerves, while human beings have 31. Thus animals are attuned to the lunar month of 28 days, while man is correlated to the solar month of 30 or 31 days. The ancient Persians were astronomers but not physiologists. They had no means of knowing the different nervous constitution of animal and man, but they saw clairvoyantly these superphysical beings. They noted and recorded their work with animal and men, and our own anatomical investigations may show us the reason for these divisions of the classes of Izzards recorded in that ancient system of philosophy. Still another class of beings should be mentioned. Those who have entered the desire world through the gate of death and are now hidden from our physical vision. These so-called dead are in fact much more alive than any of us, who are tied to a dense body and subject to all its limitations, who are forced to slowly drag this clog along with us at the rate of a few miles an hour, who must expend such an enormous amount of energy upon propelling that vehicle that we are easily and quickly tired, even when in the best of health, and who are often confined to a bed, sometimes for years, by the indisposition of this heavy mortal coil. But when that is once shed and the freed spirit can again function in its spiritual body, sickness is an unknown condition, and distance is annihilated, or at least practically so. For though it was necessary for the Savior to liken the freed spirit to the wind, which blows where it listeth, that simile gives but a poor description of what actually takes place in soul flights. Time is non-existent there, as we shall presently explain, so the writer has never been able to time himself, but has on several occasions timed others when he was in the physical body, and they speeding through space upon a certain errand. Distances such as from the Pacific coast to Europe, the delivery of a short message there and the return to the body, has been accomplished in slightly less than 1 minute. Therefore our assertion, that those whom we call dead are in reality much more alive than we, is well founded in facts. We spoke of the dense body in which we now live, as a clog and a fetter. It must not be inferred, however, that we sympathize with the attitude of certain people who, when they have learned with what ease soul flights are accomplished, go about bemoaning the fact that they are now imprisoned. They are constantly thinking of, and longing for, the day when they shall be able to leave this mortal coil behind and fly away in their spiritual body. Such an attitude of mind is decidedly mistaken. The great and wise beings who are invisible leaders of our evolution have not placed us here to no purpose. Valuable lessons are to be learned in this visible world wherein we dwell, that cannot be learned in any other realm of nature, and the very conditions of density and inertia whereof such people complain are factors which make it possible to acquire the knowledge this world is designed to give. This fact was so amply illustrated in a recent experience of the writer. A friend had been studying occultism for a number of years, but had not studied astrology. Last year she became aroused to the importance of this branch of study as a key to self-knowledge and a means of understanding the natures of others, also of developing the compassion for their errors, so necessary in the cultivation of love of one's neighbor. Love of our neighbor the Savior, enjoined upon us as the supreme commandment, which is the fulfillment of all laws, and as astrology teaches us to bear and forbear, it helps as nothing else can in the development of the supreme virtue. She therefore joined one of the classes started in Los Angeles by the writer, but a sudden illness quickly ended in death, and thus terminated her study of the subject in the physical body, ere it was well begun. Upon one of many occasions when she visited the writer subsequent to her release from the body, she deplored the fact that it seemed so difficult to make headway in her study of astrology. The writer advised continued attendance at the classes and suggested that she could surely get someone on the other side to help her study. At this she exclaimed impatiently, "Oh yes. Of course I attend the classes, I have done so right along. I have also found a friend who helps me here. But you cannot imagine how difficult it is to concentrate here upon mathematical calculations and the judgment of a horoscope, or in fact upon any subject here, where every little thought current takes you miles away from your study. I used to think it difficult to concentrate when I had a physical body, but it is not a circumstance to the obstacles which face the student here." The physical body was an anchor to her, and it is that to all of us. Being dense, it is also to a great extent impervious to disturbing influences from which the more subtle spiritual bodies do not shield us. It enables us to bring our ideas to a logical conclusion with far less effort at concentration than is necessary in that realm where all is in such incessant and turbulent motion. Thus we are gradually developing the faculty of holding our thoughts to a center by existence in this world, and we should value our opportunities here, rather than deplore the limitations which help in one direction more than they fetter in another. In fact, we should never deplore any condition, each has its lesson. If we try to learn what that lesson is, and to assimilate the experience which may be extracted therefrom, we are wiser than those who waste time in vain regrets. We said there is no time in the desire world, and the reader will readily understand that such must be the case from the fact, already mentioned, that nothing there is opaque. In this world the rotation of the opaque earth upon its axis is responsible for the alternating conditions of day and night. We call it day when the spot where we live is turned towards the sun, and its rays illumine our environment, but when our home is turned away from the sun and its rays obstructed by the opaque earth, we term the resulting darkness night. The passage of the Earth in its orbit around the Sun produces the seasons in the year, which are our divisions of time. But in the desire world where all is light there is but one long day. The spirit is not there fettered by a heavy physical body, so it does not need sleep, and existence is unbroken. Spiritual substances are not subject to contraction and expansion, such as arise here from heat and cold, hence summer and winter are also non-existent. Thus there is nothing to differentiate one moment from another in respect of the conditions of light and darkness, summer and winter, which mark time for us. Therefore, while the so-called dead may have a very accurate memory of time as regards the life they lived here in the body, they are usually unable to tell anything about the chronological relation of events which have happened to them in the desire world, and it is a very common thing to find that they do not even know how many years have elapsed since they passed out from this plane of existence. Only students of the stellar science are able to calculate the passage of time after their demise. When the occult investigator wishes to study an event in the past history of man, he may most readily call up the picture from the memory of nature, but if he desires to fix the time of the incident, he will be obliged to count backwards by the motion of the heavenly bodies. For that purpose he generally uses the measure provided by the sun's precession. Each year the sun crosses the Earth's equator about the 21st of March. Then day and night are of even length, therefore this is called the vernal equinox. But on account of a certain wobbling motion of the Earth's axis, the sun does not cross over at the same place in the zodiac. It reaches the equator a little too early, it proceeds, year by year it moves backwards a little. At the time of the birth of Christ, for instance, the vernal equinox was in about 7 degrees of the zodiacal sign Aries. During the 2,000 years which intervened between that event and the present time, the sun has moved backwards about 27 degrees, so that it is now in about 10 degrees of the sign Pisces. It moves around the whole circle of the zodiac in about 25,868 years. The occult investigator may therefore count back the number of signs, or whole circles, which the sun has preceded between the present day and the time of the event he is investigating. Thus he has, by the use of the heavenly timekeepers, a very approximately correct measure of time, even though he is in the desire world, and that is another reason for studying the stellar science. The world of thought. When we have attained the spiritual development necessary to consciously enter the world of thought and leave the desire world, which is the realm of light and color, we pass through a condition which the occult investigator calls the Great Silence. As previously stated, the higher regions of the desire world exhibit the marked peculiarity of blending form and sound, but when one passes through the Great Silence, all the world seems to disappear, and the spirit has the feeling of floating in an ocean of intense light, utterly alone, yet absolutely fearless, since unimbued with a sense of its form or sound, nor past or future, but all is one eternal now. There seems to be neither pleasure nor pain, and yet there is no absence of feeling, but it all seems to center in the one idea: I am. The human ego stands face to face with itself as it were, and for the time being all else is shut out. This is the experience of anyone who passes that breach between the desire world and the world of thought, whether involuntarily, in the course of an ordinary cyclic pilgrimage of the soul, which we shall later elucidate when speaking of the post-mortem existence, or by an act of the will, as in the case of the trained occult investigator. All have the same experience in transition. There are two main divisions in the physical world: the chemical region and the etheric region. The world of thought also has two great subdivisions: the region of concrete thought and the region of abstract thought. As we specialize the material of the physical world and shape into a dense body, and as we form the force matter of the desire world into a desire body, so do we appropriate a certain amount of mind stuff from the region of concrete thought, but we, as spirits, clothe ourselves in spirit substance from the region of abstract thought, and thereby we become individual, separate egos. The region of concrete thought. The region of concrete thought is neither shadowy nor illusory. It is the acme of reality, and this world which we mistakenly regard as the only verity is but an evanescent replica of that region. A little reflection will show the reasonableness of this statement and prove our contention that all we see here is really crystallized thought. Our houses, our machinery, our chairs and tables, all that has been made by the hand of man, is the embodiment of a thought. As the juices in the soft body of the snail gradually crystallize into the hard and flinty shell which it carries upon its back and which hides it, so everything used in our civilization is a concretion of invisible, intangible mind stuff. The thought of James Watt in time congealed into a steam engine and revolutionized the world. Edison's thought was condensed into an electric generator which has turned night to day, and had it not been for the thought of Morse and Marconi, the telegraph would not have annihilated distance as it does today. An earthquake may wreck a city and demolish the lighting plant and telegraph station, but the thoughts of Watt, Edison and Morse remain, and upon the basis of their indestructible ideas, new machinery may be constructed and operations resumed. Thus thoughts are more permanent than things. The sensitive ear of the musician detects a certain musical note in every city, which is different from that of another city. He hears in each little brook a new melody, and to him the sound of wind in the treetops of different forests give a varying sound. In the desire world we noted the existence of forms similar to the shapes of things here, also that seemingly sound proceeds from form, but in the region of concrete thought it is different, for while each form occupies and obscures a certain space here, form is non-existent when viewed from the standpoint of the region of concrete thought. Where the form was, a transparent, vacuous space is observable. From that empty void comes a sound which is the keynote that creates and maintains the form whence it appears to come, as the almost invisible core of a gas flame is the source of the light we perceive. Sound from a vacuum cannot be heard in the physical world, but the harmony which proceeds from the vacuous cavity of a celestial archetype is the voice of the silence, and it becomes audible when all earthly sounds have ceased. Elijah heard it not while the storm was raging, nor was it in evidence during the turbulence of the earthquake, nor in the crackling and roaring fire, but when the destructive and inharmonious sounds of this world had melted into silence, the still small voice issued its commands to save Elijah's life. That keynote is a direct manifestation of the higher self which uses it to impress and govern the personality it has created. But alas, part of its life has been infused into the material side of its being, which has thus obtained a certain will of its own, and only too often are the two sides of our nature at war. At last there comes a time when the spirit is too weary to strive with the recalcitrant flesh, when the voice of the silence ceases. The earthly nourishment we may seek to give will not avail to sustain a form when this harmonious sound, this word from heaven, no longer reverberates through the empty void of the celestial archetype, for man lives not by bread alone, but by the word, and the last sound vibration of the keynote is the death knell of the physical body. In this world we are compelled to investigate and to study a thing before we know about it, And although the facilities for gaining information are in some respects much greater in the desire world, a certain amount of investigation is necessary nevertheless to acquire knowledge. In the world of thought, on the contrary, it is different. When we wish to know about any certain thing there, and we turn our attention thereto, then that thing speaks to us, as it were. The sound it emits at once gives us a most luminous comprehension of every phase of its nature. We attain to a realization of its past history, the whole story of its unfoldment is laid bare, and we seem to have lived through all of those experiences together with the thing we are investigating. Were it not for one enormous difficulty, the story thus obtained would be exceedingly valuable. But all this information, this life picture, flows in upon us with an enormous rapidity in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, so that it has neither beginning nor end, for, as said, in the world of thought, all is one great now, time does not exist. Therefore, when we want to use the archetypal information in the physical world, we must disentangle and arrange it in chronological order with beginning and ending, before it becomes intelligible to beings living in a realm where time is a prime factor. That rearrangement is a most difficult task, as all words are coined with relation to the three dimensions of space and the evanescent unit of time, the fleeting moment, hence much of that information remains unavailable. Among the denizens of this region of concrete thought we may note particularly two classes. One is called the powers of darkness by Paul, and the mystic investigator of the Western world knows them as lords of mind. They were human at the time when the earth was in a condition of darkness, such as worlds in the making go through before they become luminous and reach the Fiery-mist stage. At that time we were in our mineral evolution. That is to say, the human spirit which has now awakened was encrusted in the ball of mind stuff, which was then the earth. At that time the present human spirits were as much asleep as is the life which ensouls our minerals of today, and as we are working with the mineral chemical constituents of the earth, molding them into houses, railways, steamboats, chairs, etc., etc., so those beings, who are now lords of mind, worked with us when we were mineral-like. They have since advanced 3 steps, through stages similar to that of the angels and archangels, before they attained their present position and became creative intelligences. They are expert builders of mind stuff, as we are builders of the present mineral substances, and therefore they have given us necessary help to acquire a mind which is the highest development of the human being. According to the foregoing explanation, it seems to be an anomaly when Paul speaks of them as evil and exhorts us to withstand them. The difficulty disappears, however, when we understand that good and evil are but relative qualities. An illustration will make the point clear. Let us suppose that an expert organ builder has constructed a wonderful organ, a masterpiece. Then he has followed his vocation in the proper manner, and is therefore to be commended for the good which he has done. But if he is not satisfied to leave well enough alone, if he refuses to give up his product to the musician who understands how to play upon the instrument, if he intrudes his presence into the concert hall, he is out of place and to be censured as evil. Similarly, the lords of mind did the greatest possible service to humanity when they helped us to acquire our mind, but many subtle thought influences come from them and are to be resisted, as Paul very properly emphasizes. The other class of beings which must be mentioned are called archetypal forces by the Western school of occultism. They direct the energies of the creative archetypes native to this realm. They are a composite class of beings of many different grades of intelligences, and there is one stage in the cyclic journey of the human spirit when that also labors in, and is part of, that great host of beings. For the human spirit is also destined to become a great creative intelligence at some future time, and if there were no school wherein it could gradually learn to create, it would not be able to advance, for nothing in nature is done suddenly. An acorn planted in the soil does not become a majestic oak overnight, but many years of slow, persistent growth are required before it attains to the stature of a giant of the forest. A man does not become an angel by the mere fact of dying and entering a new world, any more than an animal advances to be a man by the same process. But in time all that lives mounts the ladder of being from the clod to the god. There is no limitation possible to the spirit, and so at various stages in its unfoldment the human spirit works with the other nature forces, according to the stage of intelligence which it has attained. It creates, changes and remodels the earth upon which it is to live. Thus, under the great law of cause and effect, which we observe in every realm of nature, it reaps upon earth what it has sown in heaven, and vice versa. It grows slowly but persistently and advances continually. The region of abstract thought. Various religious systems have been given to humanity at different times, each suited to meet the spiritual needs of the people among whom it was promulgated and, coming from the same divine source. God, all religions exhibit similar fundamentals or first principles. All systems teach that there was a time when darkness reigned supreme. Everything which we now perceive was then non-existent. Earth, sky and the heavenly bodies were uncreate, so were the multitudinous forms which live and move upon the various planets. All was yet in a fluidic condition, and the universal spirit brooded quiescent in limitless space, as the one existence. The Greeks called that condition of homogeneity chaos, and the state of orderly segregation which we now see, the marching orbs which illumine the vaulted canopy of heaven, the stately procession of planets around a central light, the majestic sun, the unbroken sequence of the seasons, and the unvarying alternation of tidal ebb and flow, all this aggregate of systematic order was called cosmos and was supposed to have proceeded from chaos. The Christian mystic obtains a deeper comprehension when he opens his Bible and ponders the first 5 verses of that brightest gem of all spiritual lore, the Gospel of St. John. As he reverently opens his aspiring heart to acquire understanding of those sublime mystical teachings, he transcends the form side of nature, comprising various realms of which we have been speaking, and finds himself in the spirit, as did the prophets in olden times. He is then in the region of abstract thought, and sees the eternal verities which also Paul beheld in this, the third, heaven. For those among us who are unable to obtain knowledge save by reasoning upon the matter, however, it will be necessary to examine the fundamental meaning of words used by Street John to clothe his wonderful teaching, which was originally given in the Greek language, a much simpler matter than is commonly supposed, for Greek words have been freely introduced into our modern languages, particularly in scientific terms, and we shall show how this ancient teaching is supported by the latest discoveries of modern science. The opening verse of the Gospel of St. John is as follows. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. We will examine the words beginning, Word and God. We may also note that in the Greek version the concluding sentence reads, and God was the Word, a difference which makes a great distinction. It is an axiomatic truth that out of nothing, nothing comes, and it has often been asserted by scoffers that the Bible teaches generation from nothing. We readily agree that translations into the modern languages promulgate this erroneous doctrine, but we have shown in the Rosicrucian Cosmo-conception chapter on the occult analysis of Genesis that the Hebrew text speaks of an ever-existing essence as the basis whence all forms, the earth and the heavenly lights included, were first created, and John also gives the same teaching. The Greek word arch, in the opening sentence of the Gospel of St. John, has been translated the beginning, and it may be said to have that meaning, but it also has other valid interpretations, vastly more significant of the idea John wished to convey. It means an elementary condition, a chief source of first principle primordial matter. There was a time when science insisted that the elements were immutable, that is to say, that an atom of iron had been an atom of iron since the earth was formed and would so remain to the end of time. The alchemists were sneered at as fanciful dreamers or madmen, but since Professor J.J. Thomson's discovery of the electron, the atomic theory of matter is no longer tenable. The principle of radioactivity has later vindicated the alchemists. Science and the Bible agree in teaching that all that is has been formed from one homogeneous substance. It is that basic principle which John called arch. Primordial matter, and the dictionary defines archaeology as the science of the origin, arch, of things. Masons style God the grand architect, for the Greek word tektos means builder, and God is the chief builder, tektos, of arch. The primordial virgin matter which is also the chief source of all things. Thus we see that when the opening sentence of St. John's Gospel is properly translated, our Christian religion teaches that once a virgin substance enfolded the divine thinker, God. That is the identical condition which the earlier Greeks called chaos. A little thought will make it evident that we are not arbitrary in finding fault with the translation of the Gospel, for it is self-evident that a word cannot be the beginning, a thought must precede the word, and a thinker must originate thought before it can be expressed as a word. When properly translated, the teaching of John fully embodies that idea, for the Greek term logos means both the reasonable thought, we also say logic, and the word which expresses this logical thought. 1. In the primordial substance was thought, and the thought was with God, and God was the Word. 2. That the Word also was with God in the primal state. Later the divine Word, the creative fiat, reverberates through space and segregates the homogeneous virgin substance into separate forms. 3. Everything has come into existence because of that prime fact, the Word of God, and no thing exists apart from that fact. 4. In that was life. In the alphabet we have a few elementary sounds from which words may be constructed. They are basic elements of expression, as bricks, iron and lumber are raw materials of architecture, or as a few notes are component parts of music. But a heap of bricks, iron and lumber is not a house, neither is a jumbled mass of notes music, nor can we call a haphazard arrangement of alphabetical sounds a word. These raw materials are prime necessities in construction of architecture, music, literature or poetry, but the contour of the finished product and the purpose it will serve depends upon the arrangement of the raw materials, which is subject to the constructor's design. Building materials may be formed to prison or palace, Notes may be arranged as fanfare or funeral dirge. Words may be indited to inspire passion or peace, all according to the will of the designer. So also the majestic rhythm of the Word of God has wrought the primal substance. Arch, into the multitudinous forms which comprise the phenomenal world, according to His will. Did the reader ever stop to consider the wonderful power of a human word? Coming to us in the sweet accents of love, it may lure us from paths of rectitude to shameful ignominy, and wreck our life with sorrow and remorse, or it may spur us on in noblest efforts to acquire glory and honor, here or hereafter. According to the inflection of the voice, a word may strike terror into the bravest heart, or lull a timid child to peaceful slumber. The word of an agitator may rouse the passions of a mob and impel it to awful bloodshed, as in the French Revolution, where dictatorial mandates of mob rule killed and exiled at pleasure, or the strain of Home, Sweet Home, may cement the setting of a family circle beyond possibility of rupture. Right words are true and therefore free. They are never bound or fettered by time or space. They go to the farthest corners of the earth. And when the lips that spoke them first have long since mouldered in the grave, other voices take up with unwearying enthusiasm their message of life and love, as for instance the mystical "Come unto me," which has sounded from unnumbered tongues and brought oceans of balm to troubled hearts. Words of peace have been victorious where war would have meant defeat, and no talent is more to be desired than ability to always say the right word at the auspicious time. Considering thus the immense power and potency of the human word, we may perhaps dimly apprehend the potential magnitude of the Word of God, the creative fiat, when as a mighty dynamic force, it first reverberated through space and commenced to form primordial matter into worlds, as sound from a violin bow molds sand into geometrical figures. Moreover, the Word of God still sounds to sustain the marching orbs and impel them onwards in their circle paths. The creative word continues to produce forms of gradually increasing efficiency as media expressing life and consciousness. The harmonious enunciation of consecutive syllables in the divine creative word marks successive stages in evolution of the world and man. When the last syllable has been spoken and the complete word is sounded, we shall have reached perfection as human beings. Then time will be at an end, and with the last vibration of the Word of God, the worlds will be resolved into their original elements. Our life will then be hid with Christ in God, till the cosmic night. Chaos is over, and we wait to do greater things in a new heaven and a new earth. According to the general idea, chaos and cosmos are superlative antitheses of each other. Chaos being regarded as a past condition of confusion and disorder which has long since been entirely superseded by cosmic order which now prevails. As a matter of fact, chaos is the seed ground of cosmos, the basis of all progress, for thence come all ideas which later materialize as railways, steamboats, telephones, etc. We speak of thoughts as being conceived by the mind, but as both father and mother are necessary in the generation of a child, so also there must be both idea and mind before a thought can be conceived. As semen germinated in the positive male organ is projected into the negative uterus at conception, so ideas are generated by a positive human ego in the spirit substance of the region of abstract thought. This idea is projected upon the receptive mind, and a conception takes place. Then, as the spermatozoic nucleus draws upon the maternal body for material to shape a body appropriate to its individual expression, So does each idea clothe itself in a peculiar form of mind stuff. It is then a thought, as visible to the inner vision of composite man, as a child is to its parent. Thus we see that ideas are embryonic thoughts, nuclei of spirit substance from the region of abstract thought. Improperly conceived in a diseased mind, they become vagaries and delusions, but when gestated in a sound mind and formed into rational thoughts, they are the basis of all material, moral and mental progress, and the closer our touch with chaos, the better will be our cosmos, for in that realm of abstract realities, truth is not obscured by matter, it is self-evident. Pilate was asked what is truth, but no answer is recorded. We are incapable of cognizing truth in the abstract while we live in the phenomenal world, for the inherent nature of matter is illusion and delusion, and we are constantly making allowances and corrections, whether we are conscious of the fact or not. The sunbeam, which proceeds for 90 millions of miles in a straight line, is refracted or bent as soon as it strikes our dense atmosphere, and according to the angle of its refraction, it appears to have one color or another. The straightest stick appears crooked when partly immersed in water, and the truths which are so self-evident in the higher worlds are likewise obscured, refracted or twisted out of all semblance under the illusory conditions of this material world. The truth shall set you free, said Christ, and the more we turn our aspirations from material acquisitiveness and seek to lay up treasure above, the more we aim to rise, the oftener we get in the spirit, the more readily we shall know truth and reach liberation from the fetter of flesh which binds us to a limited environment and attain to a sphere of greater usefulness. Study of philosophy and science has a tendency to further perception of truth, and as science has progressed, it has gradually receded from its erstwhile crude materialism. The day is not far off when it will be more reverently religious than the church itself. Mathematics is said to be dry, for it doesn't stir the emotions. When it is taught that the sum of the angles of a triangle is 180 degrees, the dictum is at once accepted, because its truth is self-evident, and no feeling is involved in the matter. But when a doctrine such as the Immaculate Conception is promulgated and our emotions are stirred, bloody war or heated argument may result and still leave the matter in doubt. Pythagoras demanded that his pupils study mathematics because he knew the elevating effect of raising their minds above the sphere of feeling, where it is subject to delusion, and elevating it towards the region of abstract thought, which is the prime reality. In this place we are dealing with worlds in particular, and will therefore defer comment upon the remainder of the first 5 verses of St. John's Gospel. And life became light in man, 5, and light shines in darkness. We have now seen that the earth is compassed of 3 worlds which interpenetrate one another, so that it is perfectly true when Christ said that heaven is within you, or, the translation should rather have been among you. We have also seen that of these 3 realms 2 are subdivided. It has also been explained that each division serves a great purpose in the unfoldment of various forms of life which dwell in each of these worlds, and we may note in conclusion that the lower regions of the desire world constitute what the Catholic religion calls purgatory, a place where the evil of a past life is transmuted to good, usable by the spirit as conscience in later lives. The higher regions of the desire world are the first heaven, where all the good a man has done is assimilated by the spirit as soul power. The region of concrete thought is the second heaven, where, as already said, The spirit prepares its future environment on earth. And the region of abstract thought is the third heaven, but as Paul said, it is scarcely lawful to speak about that. Some will ask, is there then no hell? No. The mercy of God tends as greatly towards the principle of good as the inhumanity of man towards cruelty, so that he would consign his brother men to flames of hell during eternity, for the puerile mistakes committed during a few years, or perhaps for a slight difference in belief. The writer has heard of a minister who wished to impress his flock with the reality of an eternity of hell flames, and to demonstrate the fallacy of a heretical notion entertained by some of his parishioners, that when sinners come to hell, they burn to ashes, and that is the end. He took with him an alcohol lamp and some asbestos into the pulpit, and told his audience that God would turn their souls into a substance resembling asbestos. He showed them that though the asbestos were heated red hot, it did not decompose into ashes. Fortunately, the day of the hell preacher has gone by, and if we believe the Bible, which says that in God we live and move and have our being, we can readily understand that a lost soul would be an impossibility, for were one single soul lost, then logically a part of God Himself would be lost. No matter what our color, our race or our creed, we are all equally the children of God, and in our various ways we shall obtain satisfaction. Let us therefore rather look to Christ and forget creed. Creed or Christ? No man loves God who hates his kind, who tramples on his brother's heart and soul, who seeks to shackle, cloud or fog the mind by fears of hell has not perceived our goal. God sent our all religions blessed, and Christ, the way, the truth and life, to give the heavy lot and rest, and peace from sorrow, sin and strife. At His request the universal Spirit came to all the churches, not to one alone. On Pentecostal morn a tongue of flame round each apostle as a halo shone. Since then, as vultures ravenous with greed, we oft have battled for an empty name, and sought by dogma, edict, creed, to send each other to the flame. Is Christ then divided? Was Cephas or Paul nailed to the deathly tree? If not, then why these divisions at all? Christ's love doth embrace you and me. His pure sweet love is not confined by creeds which segregate and raise a wall. His love enfolds, embraces humankind no matter what ourselves or Him we call. Then why not take Him at His word? Why hold to creeds which tear apart? But one thing matters, be it heard, that brother love fill every heart. There is but one thing that the world has need to know. There is but one balm for all our human woe. There is but one way that leads to heaven above. That way is human sympathy and love. And that's not all. Our experts and regular viewers respond to all comments. Also check if you forgot to subscribe and set your bell to receive notifications about new audiobooks and other useful self-development materials that we release regularly. Join in the discussions, don't forget to give likes and, if possible and inspired, support the development of the channel financially. All useful links will be in the description and the first attached comment. Goodness, love and wisdom to all. And now move on to watch the next part of the video at the links below, or choose something from the playlists of the channel and those you see on the screen.